Hi, welcome to the latest episode of the Wellbeing Show. I'm Noel, your host, in my new home. So I'm not quite sure who I am at the moment. I'm still in between one identity and another, but I've got a great guest with me who's been very flexible and understanding as I've cancelled her and then brought her back on as I was in too much of a mess emotionally to do anything last week, and she was very kindly allowed me to bounce her to this week. Jenny Licate, who's joined us from the East Coast of the US. And I'm very, very glad that she's here. We're going to learn more about her. Before we jump in, just to remind you, this is pre-recorded. It might feel live, but it's not. If you have any questions, great. Send me a WhatsApp 07506 319 745. I'm trying to avoid calling because when you watch it, I'm probably out doing something else, and you might get a grumpy old man picking up the phone. So if you interrupt me, send me a message. And equally, I'm sure Jennifer will give us some contact details for her, but she's on a different time zone, so she would be very upset if you just called her. Gonna get out of bed. Um, I'm sure she'll be happy to field questions and messages. You can send them to me and I'll pass them on to Jennifer. That's enough from me, I think. Hi, Jennifer. How you doing?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm all right. Like I say, still a bit in transition, waiting for all my furniture to arrive and things like that. You know what it's like, all that.
Yes,
But
stressful.
glad to have moved. Very lucky that I have such high class problems. You know,
Yes,
it's an
that's
okay
true.
life. The biggest problem I've got is I've got to move home, right?
Yes.
I'll live with that. How are you doing? How's it over in the east coast of the US?
Good. Good. Everything's good. The weather's changing. It's starting to get chilly,
Yeah.
which is a little bit sad, but we're ready for it. I mean, I guess it's time. It's mid-October, so,
Yeah.
but everything's pretty good here.
And where exactly are you based?
I'm outside of Philadelphia
Right.
in Pennsylvania.
And Philadelphia's, is that got a important bit of the US history or something associated with it?
Yes, it is. The Liberty Bell is there, and that's where a lot of the documents were originally created.
That's for the founding of the US Constitution, etc.
Yes.
The Liberty Bell, tell us about the Liberty Bell. This is a British audience that might be interested.
I,
Or do you know anything about
I'm
it? Or
not
it's
going to
like,
do a
it's
great job
there.
with it. I know there's a Liberty Bell there. I know there's a crack in it. I don't know the history of it. I
Okay,
apologize. I should do
no,
better
that's
with
like
it.
all of us. If people always ask me about British history, I'm like, I haven't got the book with me, I'm afraid.
Yeah. Yes. I need to Google that real quick.
But what's happened to us? We no longer have a memory. We just have Google, right?
I know. I
Isn't that
know. You don't
interesting?
even get into conversations. You just end disagreements by saying, let me Google it and see what the real answer is to that question.
Right. Whoever controls Google controls our minds. There's a
Yes,
big
that
fight
is,
around that stuff. Is this where you grew up? Is this the part of the US that you're come from originally?
yes, I've always been in Pennsylvania. So this is where I've always been in the US.
Okay. And you have a big family, small family? What was this? Immigrant family, or you've been there forever?
We've been here for a really long time. I have a small family of origin, just my sister and I and our parents, but my mom comes from a larger family with four siblings. So the family sizes have decreased as the generations that
Which
have
is
been here.
pretty much what happens as we get wealthier in countries, isn't it? Family size
Yes.
drop. And where were your parents from? Do you go back generations in the US?
Generations in the US. My mom, I think, is third generation. They're Italian American, so they
Okay.
came from Italy. My dad's family has been here for a very long time.
So nobody knows, lost in the mist of times.
Yeah, yes,
They were found under a rock somewhere and out they came in
yes.
Neanderthal
Here
days.
they are.
Here they are. And what
Yes.
was it like growing up were you in a big city or a rural part of the world?
No, a rural part in a small town. So I was outside of Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, which is the state capital of Pennsylvania. So I was in a small town outside of Harrisburg is where I grew up.
Great. And what was that like? Sort of,
It was good. It was a little bit a little bit more country than outside of Philadelphia.
yeah,
So it was it's interesting when I go back there that people are still friendly in like stores and things like that, whereas outside of Philadelphia it gets a little bit more rushed and less
yeah,
friendly with people you might run into at the grocery store or whatever the situation is. So people are still friendly around here, but it's a little bit more of a rushed city like culture than where I grew up.
sure. I mean, in London, if you're friendly to people, they just imagine you're somebody weird. You get these strange looks. What are you being friendly? I think Americans, when they come over, they find it very strange and think London's unfriendly. It's just people are so busy. It's like, what do you want? A bit like New York, right? Oh, I think we've frozen. Don't know what's happened there. I'm just going to keep talking and hopefully Jennifer comes back to us any second now. Um, Hi, you froze there for a second. I just carried on talking.
Oh, okay.
Don't worry about it. It's fine. It happens. I'm glad you're here. Um,
Okay.
Maybe somebody's messing with those undersea cables again. Who knows? And so I was just saying that London can seem a bit unfriendly to people, but it's a very busy, big city, and everybody seems to be going somewhere fast.
Yes. Yes,
Do you
lots to
have a
do.
preference for the style of life? Are you a country person or more of a city person?
I think I'm more of a city person. Right now I'm in a suburb, so I it's a good in between, but when I go to New York City or London, I've been to London 2 times. It does feel very energizing that there's so much to do and
Yeah,
so many options and so many people. So I do like that part. I feel like in a small town, it feels like kind of the same thing all the time, so I do get energized by the
sure.
city atmosphere.
And then you grew up in your school in this small town and you enjoyed school. That was sort of good for you, or
Yes, it was good for me.
yeah. And then
Yes.
you went on to college, I guess.
Yes. I went to college and then I got my graduate degree in secondary and elementary school counseling. So I'm specifically school counseling based as opposed to counseling privately with individuals or kids.
Okay, well, we're going to come to look at the similarities and differences there because I mean, I think I know what the differences would be, similar to the UK. Um, were you always interested in going into counselling? Was that something, were you that type of child, or was it a surprise to you that you discovered this interest?
It was a surprise to me. When I went to college, I went in as a marketing major. So I was
Okay.
interested in what makes people buy things. Like why does marketing work? Why does advertisement work? What emotions are they triggering in people to make people purchase products?
Oh,
So that's what I was originally interested in.
yeah,
And then I realized that that was very closely tied to psychology. So and I majored in sociology, not psychology, and
yeah.
then I did my graduate work in counseling.
It's interesting that I think this is true, but it was Freud's nephew, I think, that was one of the founders of marketing.
Oh,
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah, yeah. And
Oh, wow.
he used to consult his uncle about this new business he was setting up on how to sell things to people. Um,
Oh, wow.
yeah,
That's
interesting,
more of a
isn't it?
connection than I even knew there
Did you
was.
not know that?
So,
No, it's really interesting. There's a sort of I remember
yes.
watching a documentary by a British documentary maker about it, and obviously Freud suggested one thing that would sell. It
Yeah.
was the thing that he was selling
Yeah.
all the time. We
Yes.
don't need to go into, but he wasn't far off the mark, I guess. But I guess
Yeah,
these
that's true.
days marketing would be more fear-based, wouldn't it? Or needs-based.
Yeah, I know. I guess it depends on the product, right?
Yeah.
Because it does seem like a lot of fear-based, you need this in your life, so people
Yeah.
buy it.
Yeah.
And then there are things that you need just to function. So, and then it's, why do you pick a certain product?
But also, and I don't know what you think about this, but I think in some ways being a psychological therapist in the broadest sense is about trying to sell something to people, not a thing or a product, but trying to sell a change to them. That
Yeah, that's an
that might be
interesting way of looking
uncomfortable.
at it.
Yeah, it might be
Yeah.
uncomfortable to accept, but how do we frame and package it to people?
Yes. That's interesting. Yes.
Yeah.
Because and you're also selling them also an idea of who they are because I feel like people have this perception of who they are and then who other people perceive them to
Sure.
be might be very different than what they feel like they're putting out into the world. So,
Yeah. And there's a strong body of knowledge, isn't there, about the big part of personal change is being able to get your network to allow that change to happen.
yes.
Because of that thing, the expectations, the patterned relationships, and so on. So when one wants to change personally, I mean, I suppose an extreme example would be somebody caught up in some sort of substance misuse addiction.
Right.
And there's a whole network of people who are using in unhealthy ways. They may have to move the whole network just to be able to.
Right.
But in families and systems, which you will know an awful lot about having worked with children, um,
Yes.
that they often can become quite stuck, those patterns of relationships.
Yes.
And then
Yes. Hard
getting
to break.
hard to break. Yes, absolutely. So you went from marketing to another form of marketing, which was psychology. What was that transition? How did that happen? I mean, I can guess, but I'm interested.
I it's hard for me to remember how it happened. I think I just was feeling like it wasn't very personal, the marketing. And I wasn't in the upper level courses, but the entry level business courses, I just felt like there was this personality to them that I felt like didn't match with who I was. Like I
Yeah,
didn't feel like I was so like, you know, I don't want to say driven, but just like so focused on the task. I feel like I'm more about let's talk about it and let's look at it from different angles and just more of the personal aspect. Where when I was in my sociology courses, it was interesting how there was multiple right answers
yeah,
and a lot of discussion. And that's interesting to me how people can look at one situation or issue and there can be so many different interpretations to it and there's no right answer.
yeah.
So I liked that. It kind of worked with my personality better.
Sociology is a really interesting subject. I did it while I was at school, which is sort of high school, I think you would call it in the US, because you call university school as well, don't you?
Yes.
Call it university. So before I went to university, I did sociology, and I did a year of sociology as my undergraduate thing as well, across the
Okay.
spectrum. And again, like you, I found it really interesting that the outcomes were negotiable and there was
Yes.
a high degree of uncertainty about it,
Yes.
and then learning to tolerate that uncertainty and the fact that I had to engage with multiple possible outcomes.
Yes.
It's really interesting for me.
Right. Did you end up graduating with psychology as the focus
No,
as
I did
opposed to
that 10 years later. I got kicked out as an undergraduate.
oh wow. That
Yes.
sounds like a good story.
Yeah, you're not here to talk about my failures. No, I went to retrain 10 years after that, for a
Okay.
professional degree, which was still a long, long time ago. I was a little baby dinosaur then. Now I'm an old dinosaur who's a bit cronky. Um, so how did your family feel about you going in and shifting this focus from, a marketing degree, which would have, I suppose, been pretty much, I'm going to get money, I'm going to go this and do that, to more of a psychology and also psychology working with kids in school, less chance of making it big, I would say.
Yes, yes. I know that my family, my mom and my dad are both in the field of education, so
Okay.
they supported it, but it was very different from what I had said I wanted because I wanted to move to a city and I wanted to do marketing and so it really shifted my, my trajectory of what I wanted to do with my life. So they were accepting of it because for them, I felt like they thought it was more in line with their values. So they were supportive of it.
So were they both teachers or
Yes, my mom was a teacher and my dad was a teacher and then a principal of schools.
okay. In the school system? What sort of which bit of the school system in the US so that we can just sort of try and navigate an understanding?
The high school system.
Okay.
So 14 through 18 years old,
Okay, and
educating those age of children.
this is the state funded education system. Yeah.
Yes, they always worked in the state funded education system.
Okay. And so it seems to me that people that work, particularly in education in schools, have chosen a vocation
Yes.
because it can be really tough work. It's,
Yeah.
and with very few rewards.
Yeah. Yes. As you pointed out, yes, very few rewards. The pay is not always matching the level of heart that you give to it and the time and so
And classically,
yes.
teachers spend a lot of their own time marking and preparing and all this sort of stuff, and often will put their own financial resources in as well, buying books. And that's a very
Yes.
familiar story here in the UK as well. So I'm guessing that was that the sort of thing your parents were doing? That was the environment that you were in.
Yes, that was the environment I was in.
Okay, okay. And so they would have gone, oh, okay, she's going the same direction as us. That's all right.
Yeah.
I understand that.
Yes. That made sense to them.
Absolutely.
Where growing up, I was like, I just felt like they didn't have any other experiences except within a school. So I was so excited to have these experiences. And then I ended up following the same path. So
So you were going to be Paris Hilton, but you changed your mind.
I changed my mind.
You changed your mind. You're still Paris Hilton, but you just
In
maybe not
my
as
own
wealthy as
mind.
her. And your sister, is she in the helping professions as well? Is that
She
she carrying on
is.
the family
She's
tradition?
she's in education too. She works as a special education teacher,
Great,
working with children with needs.
great, great. So that's the sort of context in which you are very community oriented, a family that
Yes.
wanting to do good. Um,
Yes.
okay. And so you trained in specifically school-based counselling. So tell us the differences and similarities between just a general counseling course.
So the counseling courses were in line with getting a private practice counseling. I think it's only 6 or 9 credits in addition that I would need in order to be certified as a private practice therapist. I
Yeah.
would need the 9 credits plus the licensure and, the practicum and the hours and things like that. So there were very few courses focused on what school counselors do as far as, you know, um, being involved with individualized education plans or schedules or preparing students for after they graduate as far as career counseling and things like that. There were probably 2 or 3 courses that I can remember that were focused on that, but a lot of our courses were focused on therapy and group therapy and advanced therapy practices. So we were trained in that way. But then when you're in a school, you're not able to use a lot of those skills because it's very solution focused
Yeah.
counseling.
Yeah.
And then you refer students out if they need more intensive counseling.
Okay.
But
So
you do
you're
have those skills for crisis situations, which is good.
Yeah, but so with the sort of students, I guess, that you're working with, we won't get into detail, obviously, for confidential reasons, but the types of issues that you're dealing with would be what, firefighting, maintenance, crisis, or is it longer term? Is it helping a child who's suddenly hit a problem, or is there, the disability issues around neurodiversity and learning disabilities? What's the sort of range of stuff that you're sort of working with?
I feel like that whole range. I mean, we have students who are actively thinking about suicide. So that is the most intense type of therapy we do
Oh,
when someone's actively suicidal. And then there another intense form of therapy that I've experienced is when there's a death of a student in the student body or a teacher. So that is intense, but a lot of times it's relationship issues. So, relationships with their peers, relationships with their parents, relationships with teachers. But then also, when students have mental health struggles,
Sure.
they just are pervasive and kind of, you know, ebb and flow all the time. So they'll come down if they're having a bad day or if something triggers them. So there is a lot of support we offer because they're there for 8 hours a day. And it's hard to get through a day if you're struggling with something without taking a little break
Yeah.
and talking about it, or even just getting away from the other students, kind of looking at them, because that's how kids feel. They kind of feel like they're on display and they want to act like everything's fine.
Sure.
So a lot of times the school counselors just can offer that place where they can regroup and talk about some things and then have a better mindset to go and interact with their teachers and interact with their peers and make it a good day.
And it's going to be because I know some British listeners will be like, "What's a school counselor?" Not
Okay.
because it's a very different system here. We're beginning to move towards the idea of resources in the school. And there's
Okay.
been a move towards that in terms of psychological resources in the school. Up till now, really, it's been charitable organizations that have non-profits, you would call them, non-profit organizations
Okay.
have come in and provided counselling services, but they're not embedded in the school. I think there's a
Okay.
move towards schools getting those types of services. So what you're describing, and I think I'm right in this, but tell me if I'm wrong, is that you're part of the staff team in the school. The school, it's a service that's automatically provided by the school and funded by the
Yes.
school. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
So in the UK, what would happen is they have a thing called a CAMS team, Child and Adolescent Mental Health Service, which is usually a separate organization.
Okay.
And that's funded by the NHS, the health service, the government. And it's very difficult to get resources, get services from them. Often parents will talk about this, and many parents will pay for their children to go and see a counsellor privately. Some schools do
Okay.
have counsellors, like I say, and there is a move towards moving therapists out of the specialist teams into the schools. But that's
Okay.
going to take some time. So just for people who are listening to try and understand the difference. But in the US, this idea of counselors embedded in schools has been there for a very long time, hasn't it? I mean, it's a sort of normal
Yes.
part of a school life, right?
Right, it is. And there's a another role that the school counselors fill is they also make sure that students graduate. So they're in charge of looking at the credits and making sure they have enough credits for graduation and things like that. So they're in charge of trying to get them the supports they need too if they're struggling academically.
Okay. So
So,
what we might call the pastoral care role. It's
okay.
not just therapy, but it's that broader support, emotional support, practical
Yes.
support that they might need. And then would part of your role be to look at outside services as well? If social services were needed, if there was poverty issues, you would take
Yes.
that on as well.
Yes.
Okay, okay. So it's all singing, all dancing role, really.
Yes, whatever needs to be done.
With that, I'll have
We're
to
there.
here, catch.
Yes, that's an accurate description.
Wow, how do you keep yourself sane? It's
I know. I
impressive.
know. I know.
And then I guess, but the central focus being on providing a space for that student or the student body to get in touch with what's going on inside, and nourishing and nurturing that internal world.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. That makes a lot of sense to me. I hope it does to people listening. And how long have you been doing this for now, Jennifer?
So I have been a school counselor for over 10 years. Right now, I have a role where I'm more focused on the career counseling. So in my current school that I work at, we have a department that focuses on the career counseling aspect and giving students opportunities to make plans for what they want to do after graduation, because that also it's so tied in with their self-esteem and their connection to the school and their wanting to go to school and feeling like school's important. So I've moved in that direction recently. So I've been in this role for a little under 3 years.
And it's interesting to me as as a therapist myself, I've always been very, very interested in not just what happens in the exchange with that individual, the dyad, whatever you want to call it, but actually in the world around that person.
Yes.
And I've always been much more interested in that, to be honest, if I'm honest. That's why I moved into management and running a service, because and I guess this is the sociologist in me,
Yeah.
it's the world that we need to operate in. Um,
Right.
as- and I remember one of my first ever supervisors when I first qualified as a therapist, um, and he would always be on call. And sort of when I was trained, we were trained in this relatively pure form of therapy where
Yeah.
the room was sacred, you had to protect the space. And he was my
Yeah.
first sort of real world supervisor, and he would get phone calls and deal with them. And
Okay.
he would put the bin out for the cleaning lady so that she didn't have to be embarrassed knocking on his door and getting the bin and stuff like that. And he would do all of this sort of stuff. And I remember being in sessions with him thinking, I'm not sure that's quite ethical. But actually, I learned an awful lot from that about
Yes.
like this stuff he and I were doing. If it didn't involve the practical stuff like getting the rubbish out, sorting out phone calls. I don't know my thumb thing this does that
Yeah,
thing.
you triggered a little thumbs
I
up.
don't know what it is, some AI nonsense. But it taught me a lot about the idea that there is a relationship between this therapy world and the real world itself. And you're nodding away there, so that's something that
Yeah.
resonates with you.
Yes, because if you can't change your environment, like if a child is struggling and they have so little control over their environment because their family is chosen for them, their house is chosen for them, there's a lot of factors that they don't have control over. So I feel like what you're saying, like at least if a child has a plan for what they want to do after graduation and they're starting to work towards that and they're
Yeah.
feeling some ownership of that and feeling some hope. I feel like it is hard for any individual to feel like their situation is going to get better if their environment isn't getting better. So it does go really hand in hand, in my opinion, also.
Yeah, it's also I think there's and I don't know how you what you think about this. There's something I think that as professionals we need to be honest and realistic with people. There's a
Right.
jokey saying that says before you diagnose yourself as depressed or anxious, just check whether or not you're surrounded by idiots.
I haven't heard that before. That's interesting.
But it's true, right?
Yeah,
So that the world that you place yourself in is really important. And
it
as
is.
you say, I think children often don't get much choice about
Right.
the world that they're in, but we can teach them that that is important to think about.
Yes.
When they do have choices, they make choices that are good for them as individuals.
Yes.
Yeah. So you also have in America, which we don't have here, a thing called a clinical social worker, a licensed clinical social worker, which is now social workers in the UK very much mean just service provision, organized
Okay.
service provision. There's no therapy part of it. There used to be,
Yes.
but the profession has changed.
Okay.
And so it seems to me in the US, you've maintained a link between the real world, the world that people are living in, as well as the psychological world that that produces.
Yes.
Yeah.
And social work is hard. It feels almost like as you talked about a counselor, like do this, do that, do this. I mean, it feels like social work is definitely like that because they're getting services, they're involved in crisis situations, and
Yeah.
then they're also offering therapy. So, sometimes it's like the roles are so different for social workers in the US. Sometimes they're only focused on getting services for their clients, and sometimes they're just doing it all. So it is different depending on the organization.
And what's the people tend in the UK to have a sort of a right cardboard cutout version of America, and I'm sure there's the same in America about British. We all wear crowns and say, "I love,"
Yes,
and
you're
all that
all
sort of stuff.
royal.
That's right. And we speak like Dick Van Dyke. So, but we do. What part of that cardboard cutout is that in the US? there is much more. Everybody's in therapy, and therapy is everywhere. So, how true is that? I mean, in terms of your experience of the kids and young people that you're working with, and the psychological knowledge that people might have.
I feel like there's a lot of psychological knowledge that people have. It's very much in our culture that we're talking about it and educating about it. I still think there's a stigma that not everyone's in therapy. I think people don't just share that they're in therapy unless they're very evolved and feel comfortable with themselves. A lot of people just
Yeah.
kind of keep it on the hush hush and don't really talk about it. So it's not that everyone's in it. And it is still sometimes hard for parents to get their children into therapy. So there's therapists in America that operate under the insurance system and it's more affordable, and then there's this other section of therapists that only take payment from the client. So it kind of puts a hierarchy of, oh well, these therapists don't take insurance, so they have had this reputation that they're so good that they just refuse to take insurance and they have
Yeah.
enough clients without having to bother with that. And then other therapists that do. So I don't know if it's like that in the UK, but that's another, there's kind of, some discrepancy with that in the US with the
I mean, I
therapists.
think the snobbery around money still exists. I mean, I think that's
Yeah.
fairly common across the Western world. So
Yes.
the idea of attaching a large amount of money to something, people think that means it's better. My
Right.
experience is actually, and I work in the private sector. My experience is that often very wealthy people are so gate guarded, gatekept, whatever that word is, that they
Yes.
often get rubbish services because the way
Okay.
into services for them, there'll be a few gatekeepers, and as long as you've made friends with the gatekeeper, you're in. It doesn't matter what the quality of it is. Uh,
Right.
so protected that sort of any old junk is fine. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So um, so it's a sort of protected world in that sense.
Yes.
And then there's all the rest of us that live in this other world.
Yes.
And in the US as well, it's very different in terms of legislation. So everybody who works as a therapist in the US is licensed. That's just not true in the UK at all.
Oh, interesting.
There's
Okay.
very few people licensed. I'm licensed, but very
Okay.
few people are licensed. It might change. This government's talking about changing it, but the vast majority of therapists that people would come across the public are not licensed. So,
Interesting.
isn't that interesting? Yeah.
Yes. So how do they have the background and the experience to help their clients? They
A
just
good question.
research it? Yeah.
That's a good question. It's difficult to know without licensing,
Yes.
genuinely. I think it partly comes from because you have state boards that license you.
Okay.
And there isn't so much local control like that in the UK. So for licensing to happen, it seems to need to come from the central government, and that's a
Okay.
slow moving beast that's difficult to convince that it's important to do. I
Yes.
better not go into that subject because I will get on a soapbox.
Okay. Okay. It's very interesting to me. Sorry, I kind
Well,
of
we'll talk
needed
about
to
it
ask
off
those
camera.
questions. Yeah. Yes.
Now, I guess, kids are kids, whatever country they come from. There's things that all children share in terms of anxieties, depressions, body image issues, mental health issues, and pretty much the same. And parents here will understand that as it's the same thing as parents in the US. Although we tend to think, and I don't know how true this is, there is a unique thing that happens in the US around gun violence and things like that. That
Yes.
to us is just complete alien because nobody has a gun here. Uh,
Yes.
but that's the reality of dealing with that sort of stuff. And I can see your face changing. I'm sorry to bring up
Yeah.
the subject,
Yeah.
but
No, that's
immediately the
okay.
whole of your face just dropped like, oh God.
Yeah.
I mean, it is like that, right? Isn't it? It is a sort of quite a depressing situation to look at for me. I don't know what it's like to be in there.
Yes, yes. And being in the schools after a school shooting will happen, it just feels so somber. And
Yeah,
you know, every time on the news they interview people and they say, I never thought it would happen here. No one ever thinks it's going to happen
yeah,
in their school.
yeah,
So there's that feeling like you never know where the next school shooting is going to happen. And so it is very sad and very scary, and it creates anxiety in
Yeah,
kids, because realistically, they can't feel like their school is safe if they're really thinking about
yeah,
it. So it does, students who tend to be anxious sometimes focus on that and feel
yeah.
fearful about going to school, especially after big school shootings happen.
Sure. And when it hits the news, um,
Yes.
and it's quite a regular occurrence now. Although the US is huge, and people should understand that, even
Yes.
though there's regular shootings, it's a tiny, 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 tiny number of actual schools that
Yes.
experience this. But it's just so shocking, I think. Um,
It is.
sense of fear is something I talk to with my American friends. It's something I experienced for the last time I went to the US, I was in California, um,
Okay.
and with my stepson, and we went to Disneyland World, whatever it's called in LA.
Yeah.
And I remember walking through a shopping mall, which is huge. If for people in the UK, these things are like the size of cities. Um, and we were getting some extra luggage because he bought so many toys in Disney
Oh,
that we had to have more suitcases. And then we were walking through this mall. Suddenly, I had this feeling of anxiety, and just this thought popped into my head unbidden. Oh, this is where those strange people come with guns and shoot you.
yes.
And it was suddenly this intrusive thought, and I started to feel my heart rate go up and my anxiety. And I'm guessing that's the type of thing that's happening for the kids that you're working with, right?
Yes. Yes. Where
And
where
for
once
you
it
as
gets
well as a
into their
profession,
head.
for
What
you
did you
as
say?
well
I'm
as a
sorry.
person working with that.
Yes. Yes, because with something that's that dangerous, you do have to acknowledge that there is a reason to be fearful.
Yeah,
But then the chances of it happening, I mean, it's like with any fear, the fear of flying or the fear of public speaking. I mean, there is a fear, and you have to acknowledge that there is a fear, and there is such a thing as healthy fear, but you have to just live your life and trust that it's very small, these occurrences, and
yeah,
try to put it out of your mind and focus on the positive. So it is challenging to work with children who are afraid of the school shootings
yeah.
because you can
But also, you
understand
as
their
an
fear.
individual, I guess you also need to think about your own needs within that.
Right,
And how do you resource yourself? There's that saying, isn't there? If the oxygen mask dropped down on the airplane, put it on yourself first,
right.
because without the oxygen yourself, you're not really going to be able to do anything for anybody else. And so I guess your needs come up in that one quite appropriately.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes, because you think about, your family and your children at home, and you want to make sure you're healthy for them and you're taking care of yourself, even like just generally with the stress of working and things like that, you want to make sure that you're taking the time you need to take care of yourself so that you're good for yourself, but also your family and the
yeah,
children you work with. And so it is, I mean, it is important to take care of yourself and see what's happening in my body. Am I feeling fearful?
exactly.
Am I,
Yeah.
being triggered by some of these conversations that are going on? So that's
And
a
it seems to
check-in I
me that
do.
when a mental health professional does that, that's appropriate modeling for the patient as well, is
Yes,
to acknowledge that, this is the world we live in. It can be frightening and difficult and scary. It
right.
affects me. I'm in this world with you. I'm not in some strange altered reality somewhere.
Yes. Sadly, we're not
Well,
floating above the clouds.
even after a visit to Disneyland, I was feeling it. I was like, whoa. And then finally, I guess before we move on to what you're currently doing in your book, etc., is the we are noticing in the UK, and it's definitely been happening in schools, more extremism, extremist messages, issues around quite sort of toxic visions of masculinity amongst young men. We have failing rates of education for young men in the UK. Young men not
Okay.
doing so well in the education system.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, there's been quite a gap has opened up, and they're looking at it, and they need to do something about it. But there's also been issues around young men being radicalized online by there's a a guy who's, I think, a friend of your current president who is
Hmm.
accused of trafficking. He's a British guy. His
Oh
name's
gosh.
Tate.
Okay.
He has a very strong online presence and he encourages young men to be awful, really.
Oh no.
Be quite gross in their attitudes, quite
Okay.
misogynistic. Is those the types of things that are floating around the US, or it's not really happening for you?
I'm not seeing a lot of that right now. I do see the divide though. I see that the two parties and the two philosophies, I feel like it is getting a little bit more extremist as opposed to just the thought of, everyone has the right to be
Yeah,
who they want to be, to allow people the grace to be who they want to be without putting your own ideas and thoughts on people. I'm noticing that seems to be gone. It feels like there people want to declare right and wrong and good and bad, and where so much, I mean, we talked about it before with the sociology, so many right answers. It's like there's so many right paths. And who are you to say what except for extreme situations like you're talking about? It's like there's a lot of that judgment and come to my camp and feel this way and think this way and don't like these groups of people. So
yeah.
I'm seeing that
And
in,
that's quite a difficult pressure, I think, on young people because their minds are still forming. Their
yes,
views of themselves and other people are still forming, and they're quite vulnerable, I think, to
I think so too.
yeah. So, I mean, thank you for that. It's really interesting to sort of look at it. Obviously, kids and parents are the same wherever you go, really,
Right.
have the same issues. And well, I think parents all have the same desires for their kids, that they're going to be happy and be able to earn a living and have a nice partner and have their own family if
Yes.
they wish and so on. And so there's a lot more that unites us, I think, than divides us, really.
I think so too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, without a doubt. But you have developed more of an interest in certain aspects of children's psychology recently, haven't you? Do you want to tell us about that and how you got involved in thinking about it? It's around anxiety, I think.
So when I was working as a school counselor at a high school, I was doing group counseling. So in addition to working with students individually, we sometimes run small groups for
Mm,
students where we focus on one topic. So I was seeing anxiety come up a lot. And in this group, I had in the United States, we call them the ninth grade students. I had a ton of ninth grade students, which means they were 14, 15 years old. And it can be hard sometimes to get those students talking because they are being vulnerable with their peers. Sometimes they're peers that they don't know. They're not often their friends. They're just picked to be in this group because they're struggling with the same topic. So I I had some good group members who really would get the conversation going, which was super helpful for me because as a counselor, you need your clients to share or else it doesn't work. It's just the
yeah,
counselor talking.
yeah,
So I had this idea to write a book about a group therapy for anxiety because all the different students were presenting in different ways. One student would have panic attacks, another, most of the students just had generalized anxiety disorder, but their triggers were different and the coping strategies that worked for them were different. So I just had this idea to write a book about anxiety and about an anxiety group at school to educate children on anxiety is so broad.
yeah,
Just because you're not triggered in the same way that you hear about someone else being triggered doesn't mean it's not still anxiety. And then the coping strategies that works for one student might not work for you, and that's okay. And there again, so many right answers and so many different situations. So I had this idea to write this book, and
love
I
it.
thought it would be a really great way for a counselor to get kids talking about it. If you don't have these model group members who are sharing and being vulnerable, then you can talk about the characters and kind of connect with the characters and talk through some of your own issues in a safe way, just kind of easing them into it.
I
So
love
that
it.
was my
I mean,
idea.
there's a number of things I really like about that. One is this idea that because I think when people are anxious or depressed or have some other sort of mental health issue, and anxiety and depression are the common ones. They're the ones
Yes.
that most of us are going to experience at some point in our life. That's the truth.
Right.
Um, but when we get these symptoms, we often feel so alone in them.
Yes.
And that's in the nature of the symptomology that we feel there's something wrong with me specifically. I'm specifically broken in a unique way, and that's why this is happening to me. And so then
Yes.
writing about this multiplicity of experience and encouraging people to reconnect and go, well, no, it's pretty normal, really. So
Yes.
it's part of the normal experience of being a human being. I love that
Yes.
idea. That sort
Okay,
of
good.
normalization thing. And also turning them into characters. I mean, I'm trained as a drama therapist originally, and
Oh,
always
interesting.
when you give me characters, I'm like, yeah, that's right, let's do that. So the idea of the characters was rather than because you could have just written a textbook, right?
Right.
And describe these are signs and symptoms of blah 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 blah. This is what you do, but you
Yes.
choose to write it in this way. Why in this way? What was sort of inspiring you to write characters that could be identified with?
Because I felt like it would give the children hope and connection, and it would have them rooting for the characters and seeing that the character can do better by the end of the story by using some of the coping strategies and having hope that they can get better, because I feel like that's so much of mental health struggles is
Yeah,
if you don't have the hope that things can get better, you're not going to do the work to get yourself to a better place. So I thought the characters could take the children through that journey as they were reading about the characters and kind of root for this character who in the beginning wasn't sure if he wanted to join the group, and
yeah,
then
right.
by the end it really was valuable. So I was
So
like,
like
that's
that
very
hero's
realistic.
journey
Yeah.
experience.
Yes.
That's great. I mean, because that is literally the whole experience of childhood, isn't it? You're constantly on this journey of
Yes.
changing and evolution with no real sense of what the outcome is, even though the world tells you you should do. But actually, you got no idea. Um,
Yes.
but you just somehow got to get on with it, haven't you? So,
Yes.
and
Yes.
also,
Just
I love that idea of that sort of characters in the sense of my understanding of characters and roles, particularly in literature and literate behavior. I guess you understand from child development studies that there's oral, there's literate cultures, but literate behavior and literate thinking is a unique mentalization process, which has specific psychological sort of benefits to us. And so creating a character, I'm guessing, would allow the kids to have some emotional distance from their own symptoms,
yes.
place it in the character, and then they can analyze it a bit better, a bit more
Yes.
safely, as it were.
Yes. And then they're not, then if they can talk about the character and the character's journey, they're putting themselves in that
Yeah,
position too, but not having to be vulnerable to talk about
that's
themselves.
right. That's right. So it gives them this protection, I guess, that,
Yes.
but also just from their own thinking as well, because these topics, because we forget, I think, children can be overwhelmed, even if they're 14 or 15, they're still
Yes.
children.
Yeah.
That stuff overwhelms them, right?
Yes.
And then having any sort of what I would call containment of that overwhelm allows the sort of cognitive processing functions to work. You're nodding away. Was that
Yes.
part of your thinking then?
Yes. Yes. That was part of my thinking, that then they're seeing the options for this character
Yeah,
and they're learning without even knowing that they're learning. Because I think
that's right.
sometimes
That's right.
kids or people get resistant, like, well, it's never going to change. It's always going to be this way. And,
Yeah,
they get kind of afraid to try and afraid to hope. But I thought by taking themselves out of it, they can see the possibilities and they can see
that's
how that
right.
they can make their situation
And
better.
it's that big conundrum, I think, in the work, which is that how do you work with somebody whose higher functioning is being shut down by their symptoms?
Yes.
And trying to find any sort of technique. And I think storytelling seems to me a really clever way of doing it and creating
Thank you.
characters because people can sort of, if you like, perform their way into
Yeah.
being well. It's not really me,
Yes.
but it is me.
Yeah.
And you know about that sort of theatre term, I guess, the it's now gone out of my head. It will come back. Suspending disbelief.
Oh, I don't know about that.
So in theatre, there's this idea that we sit in a theatre, we know it isn't real, but we suspend that disbelief and can emotionally identify with what's happening.
Uh, oh, I love that.
It's, no,
Yes.
it's part of the theory of theatre and how it works. But
Okay. I don't know
that
a lot
willing
about
suspension of
theater.
disbelief is something that
Okay.
happens in literature as well with characters. When we watch
Okay.
a movie or read a book, there's also, and I think I wonder if your thinking was part of this as well. The specific stage that children develop what's called literate play behaviors when they can imaginatively play alone, and that
Yes.
happens quite young, but it's sort of pre-reading behavior. And that ability to be creative, it seems to me, is a really important gift to give to children.
Yes. Yes. And I feel like they start to get away from it, but it is so important to allow children the creativity. And that's one of the coping skills for anxiety is to do something creative, to
That's
paint,
right.
to draw, to read. Anything creative can get your mind out of focusing on your negative thoughts. So I, yeah, I really like the idea of encouraging creativity across the board for kids.
And it seems to me you've written a book that walks the walk, as it were. So it's providing in its structure and the way you've written it with the characters. You provided a therapeutic tool in and of its own right, and then you
Yes.
can learn as well. Then there's the
Yes.
possibility of going on to learn. Yeah.
Yes. And I wanted it to be accessible too, because like we talked about with therapy, sometimes it is hard to get into a therapist or for parents to be behind their child for getting into therapy and thinking that it's, severe enough that they need to get into therapy. So I liked the
Yes.
idea of
Yes. 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 Yes.
having these
Yeah.
accessible tools where they can learn and kind of have the introduction to, okay, these are the mental health struggles. This is what you can do while you're waiting to go to therapy or,
This
in
is what you can
addition to
do to
therapy.
avoid needing to go to therapy.
Yes,
You know what I mean?
yes,
It's like ideally you organize your life so well that you don't
yes,
need to actually, but you have a top up every like an MOT, a sort of a tune up from a therapist every now and then would be ideal in my book.
right. Yes, I
Check.
agree.
Am I doing the right thing? Yeah, yeah, I am. Okay, off you go. Get on with it. What's the book called so that people can get hold of it if they're interested?
It's called My Anxiety is Messing Things Up.
Ah, that's to the point.
Yes, yes.
And who is
So
it who is it principally aimed at? Children, parents, teachers?
children. So it's a quick read chapter book. So it's aimed at children, but it's also a tool that parents and counselors and teachers can use to educate children.
Okay, so they can use it as an interactive tool. If
Yes.
they want to do a session, they could choose a character or a chapter.
Yes. And
Great.
all my books, I have teacher and counselor activity guides that accompany the books
Right.
with discussion questions and activities following each chapter. So it does make it easy for a teacher or a counselor or a parent to make sure that they're encouraging the discussion and giving them some ideas of questions they can ask to prompt understanding and discussion and just more learning about the topic.
And how many books have you written now, Jennifer?
I've written 9 so far.
I mean, I think people who write even one book are certifiable, but nine, how on earth did you manage that?
I know. I managed it when I was not working. I do a lot of nighttime writing.
I'm sure you did. And on top of that, I'm sure you have your own family obligations as well. I mean, how on
Yes,
earth do you fit all this stuff in? It's just incredible. Just
I
incredible.
know.
And so the 9 books are all in mental health. Are they similar in style in terms of being creative tools that can be used?
Yes, they're similar in style. They focus on different topics that most children deal with. They focus on friendship drama or the pressure to fit in or bullying or depression. So there's lots of different topics that I've written on, and they're all focused on teaching children those social and emotional skills to get through
And they're all
struggles.
child friendly in the same way as this one.
Yes.
So a child could read it and get a lot out of just reading it, and then a professional or a parent can guide them through their learning as well and add to that learning experience.
Yes.
Brilliant, brilliant. Where
Thank
can
you.
people find all these books? And do you have to randomly search you? But have you got a website?
I do have a website. It's storiesbyjennifer.com is my website, and it has information about all the books and links to purchase the books on Amazon or Barnes and Noble or through
Mhm.
my publisher. So there's all kinds of information on the website.
So say the name of the website again.
Storiesbyjennifer.com.
Stories by Jennifer. It's Jennifer.
That's right.
Storiesbyjennifer.com. Okay, we'll make sure there's a link that goes out. Do you
Okay, thank
do, I
you.
mean, apart from all these plates you're spinning, do you do talks and things like that as well? Can people sort of ask you to come in and chat to their sort of college campus or their scout group, etc.?
Yes, yes. I sometimes go to schools and do readings and talks about anxiety or different topics that they want to talk about.
Absolutely fantastic. What do your family
Thank
think
you.
about you gallivanting all over the place and abandoning them?
I know they don't love it. I do very little gallivanting.
Look, it's we're at the end of time. So storiesbyjennifer.com. Any other ways that people can get hold of you, social media, etc.?
Yes, I'm on Instagram, and on Instagram, I'm Stories by Jennifer Licate, and I'm on Facebook, Stories by Jennifer also. So it's always that search tool.
Brilliant. I'm gonna make sure as soon as I'm up here, I'm gonna follow you on Instagram and sort of promote whatever you're doing. I love what you're doing, by the way, Jennifer. I really,
Thank
really
you.
fantastic work. Really
Thank you. I really appreciate that. Thank
Oh, it's
you.
just so important. And I think, working in a tough environment at the moment with kids. And so, a lot of kids are very frightened at the moment, I think. And so
Yeah,
the more resources, the better. Um,
that's how I feel too.
Absolutely. The more information, the more knowledge, the better protected we are. Um,
Yes.
and certainly with children. Thank you for joining us. It's quite early in the morning for you. I think it's about 11 or something in the morning or 12.
Yes.
So
Yes.
I hope you enjoy the rest of your day and have a fantastic time. You stay there for now.
Thank
So
you.
I hope you have found it as informative and illuminative as I have, talking to Jennifer. Do check out storiesbyjennifer.com plus stories by Jennifer. Go and Google it. I'm certainly going to follow her on Instagram and see what's happening. And it's also, I think, really coming back to this question of hope, we get so much negative stuff on the news, and meeting people like Jennifer is great. It just tells us, no, no, no. All that nonsense is just selling stuff. The reality is good people doing good work, like Jennifer. And that's the reality we need to maintain in our heads in this sometimes very frightening world. So it's been lovely to have you on, Jennifer. I hope you've all enjoyed
Thank
it.
you.
You stay there for now, and thank you everybody for joining us. And I'll see you at the next episode of the Wellbeing Show. So bye bye for now.